My name is Lydia Moore, and I'm 38 years old. I never imagined justice would start with a pair of scissors. It happened the day my daughter came home, trembling, her beautiful hair hacked off by people who called themselves family. I looked at her, my 12-year-old girl, Ellen, eyes full of shame, fists clenched around a hoodie she pulled low over her head. I asked her what happened. She whispered, "Grandma and Aunt Diane said I was too proud of my hair, so they took it." I stayed quiet, just long enough to keep from screaming. Then I said, "They took the wrong thing, because your pride isn't in your hair, it's in your heart." Before I take you deeper into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your city in the comments, hit that like button, and if you've ever stood up to toxic family, this story is for you. It was a Saturday morning like any other. The kind where the sun peeks through the curtains just right and the world feels a little less complicated. In our small kitchen, the smell of cinnamon waffles filled the air while the sound of Ellen humming off-key floated down the hallway. She was always singing, badly, but with heart. I stood at the stove flipping the last waffle, smiling to myself. "Mornin'," she chirped, sliding into the room, her curls bouncing like springs. She wore the blue hoodie I got her last Christmas, sleeves too long, but she liked it that way. Said it felt like armor. "Morning, sunshine," I said, plating the waffles. "Big day today. You ready for the party?" She nodded, grinning. "I even picked out earrings." "Oh?" "Tiny ones, just enough sparkle to say I tried, but not enough to make Aunt Diane roll her eyes." I raised an eyebrow. "You shouldn't have to dim yourself to make other people comfortable." She shrugged, her tone light but pointed. "Well, not everyone loves confidence, especially when it's 12 and female." That stopped me. She was 12, but sometimes her soul felt older than mine. We sat down to eat. She drizzled syrup in slow spirals, then looked up at me with that same look she always gave when something was brewing in her mind. "Mom," she said between bites, "I know I'm not like other girls in the family. I don't try to fit in, but I like me. I like my hair. I like being different." I looked at her then. Really looked. She had no idea how powerful she was, no idea how much light she carried, and even less idea how much that light threatened some people. I reached across the table and took her hand. "That," I said, "is the thing that makes me most proud of you." She smiled. "I thought you'd say that." We got ready together. I helped her smooth her hair into a soft half-up style, leaving the curls wild and full in the back just how she liked them. She twirled once in front of the mirror, caught her own reflection, and nodded at herself like, "Yeah, that's me." We were going to a birthday party for her cousin Kira, my niece, Diane's daughter, the golden child. I hadn't wanted to go, I'll be honest. Every family gathering with my mother, Gertrude, and my sister Diane felt like I was stepping into a play I didn't audition for. One where I was always cast as the disappointment. But Ellen wanted to see her cousins, so I went, for her. The house was just like I remembered. Too clean, too cold. Everything matched, but nothing felt lived in. People mingled in the backyard, holding plastic champagne flutes and talking about things they didn't really care about. Ellen blended right in, at first. She laughed with a group of kids near the cupcake table. A few of the grown-ups complimented her hair, said she looked so grown. I saw her beam with pride, brushing her curls back behind her shoulder like they were a crown. That's when I noticed Diane watching. Not smiling, not proud, just measuring. Gertrude was beside her, sipping her sparkling water with that look she always gave me, part boredom, part disdain. I felt something twist in my gut. I knew that look. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. And if I had, I might have grabbed my daughter and run, but I didn't. I smiled, stayed polite, told Ellen to enjoy herself while I stepped away to help Kira unwrap presents. I had no idea that in the next 30 minutes, my daughter would be lured into a guest bedroom and come out looking like a shell of herself. I was in the kitchen when it happened. The adults had migrated indoors to slice cake and gossip over decaf. I was helping Kira unwrap presents, teenage girl stuff, mostly makeup sets and a ring light, while keeping half an eye on the hallway. Just enough distance to give Ellen space, but still close enough to step in if needed. I didn't see her leave the yard, but I noticed when she didn't come back. 15 minutes, 20. I asked a boy near the soda table if he'd seen her. He shrugged, said maybe she went to the bathroom. Then I heard it. a stifled, muffled sound. Not loud enough to draw attention, but loud enough to catch a mother's ear. It was the kind of sound you only recognize when you've heard it before, when you've made it yourself. A sound caught between fear and humiliation. I followed it down the hallway. The guest room door was cracked just slightly. I pushed it open. And there she was. My daughter. My brave, sparkly 12-year-old girl. On her knees, trembling, surrounded by clumps of her own hair on the carpet. Gertrude stood over her, one hand still holding a pair of scissors. Diane was in the corner, arms crossed, satisfied. They didn't flinch when I entered, didn't hide the scissors, didn't act surprised. Diane just looked at me and said, she needed a lesson in humility. Gertrude chimed in. That hair was turning her into something she's not. Someone proud. That's not becoming on a little girl. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I looked at my daughter. Her curls were gone. What was left were uneven, hacked tufts that barely clung to her scalp. Her eyes were wide, glassy. Her lips quivered, but no sound came out. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about hair. It never was. This was about control, about shrinking women into corners, about repeating the same punishments disguised as tradition. I had felt it my whole life. Whenever Diane succeeded, I was reminded to stay quiet, to not outshine, to be grateful for scraps. I knew what that room felt like. I had been on that floor too, just not with scissors, with silence, with shame. But not today. I stepped forward, slowly, and crouched beside my daughter. I placed my hand gently on the back of her neck. Her skin was cold and clammy. You're okay, I whispered. You're going to be okay. Diane rolled her eyes. It's just hair, Lydia. You always overreact. That's when I saw movement from the doorway. It was Milo, Diane's son, maybe 15, holding a phone, his face pale. I didn't know they were really gonna, he muttered. I took a sharp breath. Did you record it? He nodded, eyes darting to the screen like it burned his hand. Send it to me, I said. Right now. He hesitated, then tapped the screen. The video came through. I didn't even need to press play. Just the thumbnail, Ellen kneeling, Gertrude's hand in the air, Diane laughing, was enough. I turned to look at them. The women who raised me, no apology, no remorse, just irritation that I was making a scene. So I stood up, helped Ellen to her feet, and walked past them without another word. In the car, Ellen didn't cry. She just stared out the window, one hand on her head, the other gripping her phone. At the next red light, she turned to me. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't do anything wrong, did I? I blinked hard. No, baby, you didn't. But I did. I let her near the same people who hurt me. And that's when I knew this wasn't just her story. It was mine too. And it was far from over. We didn't speak on the drive home. I watched her through the rearview mirror, my daughter, my Ellen, staring out the window like the world had stopped meaning anything. Her hands kept moving, like she didn't know what to do with them. They went from her lap to her head, then to the zipper on her hoodie. At one point, she tried to stuff the ends of her sleeves into her fists as if to disappear. I pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. She didn't move. Do you want to go inside? I asked gently. She nodded, but her feet were slow, like the weight of what had just happened hadn't quite settled yet. Inside, she went straight to the couch and curled up, her back to me. No TV, no phone, just silence. I stood in the hallway, holding the keys in one hand, the phone in the other. My thumb hovered over the screen where the video waited. I hadn't watched it yet. I couldn't. Not while she was in the room. So I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and pressed play. What I saw broke something I didn't even know was still intact. The laughter, the tone, the deliberate slicing, slow and theatrical. Diane's voice saying, "There, now you look normal." My mother's voice, cold, unbothered, telling Ellen to, "Stop crying, it's just hair." I dropped the phone onto the bath mat. This was more than bullying. This was humiliation as punishment. It was psychological violence, dressed up in pearls and polite smiles. The same kind I'd grown up under. The same that turned me into someone who flinched at compliments and apologized for existing. They had passed it down like a recipe. Generational trauma, served hot. I thought I had broken the cycle. I thought I was different. But I had walked my daughter straight into the lion's den, and now she had the bite marks to prove it. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back didn't blink, didn't cry. She just stood there, hollowed out and furious. I walked back into the living room and sat on the floor beside Ellen. Not too close, just enough. She didn't look at me. After a few minutes, she asked, "Why did they do that to me?" My throat closed. I wanted to say it was jealousy, insecurity, control. I wanted to tell her they were broken people trying to break others. But what came out was softer. "Because you're powerful and they're scared of girls who don't shrink." She blinked, finally turning to face me. "But it's just hair." "No, sweetheart, it never was just hair." She pulled the hoodie tighter around her and rested her head on her knees. I could tell she didn't fully understand. Not yet. But some part of her believed me, trusted me. That was something. That was enough for now. I went to the kitchen, made her some tea, and left it on the table near the couch. Then I grabbed my phone again. This time I didn't look away. I watched the whole video again, start to finish, and saved it in 3 places. I backed it up to the cloud. I copied it to a drive. I labeled it Truth, Unedited, because I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing for sure: we weren't going to stay silent, not this time. That night, after Ellen finally drifted off to sleep with the help of lavender tea and sheer exhaustion, I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. She slept curled in a ball, hoodie still on, the hood tugged over her shorn head like a blanket she could hide under. I wanted to go in and stroke her back, tell her everything was going to be okay. But the truth was, I wasn't sure it would be. Not until I made it okay. I went into the bathroom again, sat on the cold tile floor, and let the memories come. The ones I usually buried under work deadlines and grocery lists. It was the spring of 7th grade. I had worn a blue floral dress to school that day. I loved that dress. My aunt had sent it from New York, and it made me feel special, different from the plain hand-me-downs Diane passed down with visible disdain. But Diane didn't like different. She had waited until we were walking home. There were other girls with us, friends of hers, not mine. I lagged behind, quiet, clutching my books like a shield. That's when she turned and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You think you're cute in that dress, huh?" I said nothing. Then she yanked the hem of the dress and, with a small pair of school scissors she kept in her backpack, cut a jagged line right across the back. The girls laughed. I remember the wind hitting my legs as I walked the rest of the way home, humiliated but silent. Mom had seen the cut dress when I got in. She didn't ask, just said, "You shouldn't provoke your sister." That was the part I never forgot. Not the scissors, not the laughter, the silence, the way no one defended me, the way I learned to stop defending myself. And now, here I was, decades later, with a daughter who had just been humiliated by the very same women. And I had brought her there, like it was safe, like they had changed. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. There was fire behind her eyes. Not just sadness, not just shame, conviction. I stepped into my room and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I pulled out an old notebook I hadn't touched in years. Inside were scribbles from therapy sessions, affirmations, half-finished letters I never sent. But on the first page was something my therapist had said years ago, something I'd copied in bold red ink. "You either repeat the cycle or you break it. There is no in-between." I closed the notebook slowly. No more in-between. I walked back into the living room, picked up my phone again, and texted Milo. "Thank you. I have the video. I won't tell anyone you sent it. But I want you to know. You did the right thing." He read it within seconds, replied with a simple, "Okay." I knew it wasn't bravery he had acted on. It was guilt, or maybe fear. But either way, he had handed me the key. Now it was up to me to unlock the door and walk through it, because the real damage wasn't the haircut. It was the message. And I wasn't going to let my daughter believe it. Not for one more day. The next morning, I found Ellen sitting at the kitchen table, legs folded under her, hoodie still zipped to her chin. Her tea had gone cold. She hadn't touched the toast. She didn't look up when I walked in. I sat across from her and waited. After a few moments, she finally asked, "Are we going back?" "To Grandma's?" I said. She gave a tiny nod. "No," I answered. "We're not going back. Not to her house. Not to anything like that." She exhaled, and I saw her shoulders drop, just a little. like she had been bracing for a different answer, like she wasn't sure she could trust me to choose her over them. Then she said very quietly, "I still feel gross." I knew what she meant. Shame clings to you in invisible ways. Even when logic says you're the victim, your body remembers the sting. It tucks itself into your bones. I reached over and gently touched her hand. "It's not your fault. You know that, right?" She nodded again, but the kind of nod people give when they want to believe something, not when they do. That's when I took out my phone and opened the video. "Ellen," I said, my voice calm but clear, "I need to ask you something important." She looked at me, wary. "I'm going to the police," I said. "I need to report this, but I can't do it without your voice, your story." She blinked. "You want me to talk to them?" "I'll be right next to you. You won't be alone. But yes, I need them to hear what happened, in your words." She bit her lip. Her fingers curled into the sleeves again. "I don't want people to laugh at me," she said, "or say it's not a big deal." "They might," I admitted. "Some people don't understand what it's like to be humiliated by people who are supposed to love you." "But you understand," she said. "I do." She looked down at the table. Then she took a breath and whispered, "Okay, if you go with me, I'll do it." I nodded, holding back tears. "Then we'll do it together." That afternoon, I called ahead and made an appointment at the local precinct. I packed snacks, brought tissues, printed out a transcript of the video, and charged my phone. I don't know why I felt the need to prepare like it was a courtroom drama, but something about organizing the chaos gave me control. The officer who greeted us was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, gentle voice, kind eyes. She invited us into a small room with plain chairs and a table that wobbled slightly when I leaned on it. Ellen sat next to me, her arms crossed tightly. The officer asked if she wanted to speak alone or with me in the room. She glanced at me, then said, "She stays." So I stayed. And my daughter, my brave, wounded, incredible daughter, told the story. Not all at once, not cleanly. She stumbled through parts, paused to catch her breath. Her voice cracked when she described the scissors, but she didn't stop. And when she was done, the officer reached across the table and said, "Thank you, Ellen. That was very brave." Ellen gave a tiny nod, but this time it felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, she had taken a little piece of her power back. When we left the building, I squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. We didn't say much on the way home. We didn't have to. Something had shifted. We had started. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its slow, steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear Ellen shifting in her sleep. Each soft creak of the mattress reminded me that she was still here, still under my roof, still whole, even if something inside her had cracked. The next morning, I packed her lunch for school even though I knew she wouldn't go. I didn't ask. She didn't offer. Her eyes said enough. The weight of what she'd shared with the officer the day before had taken its toll. Courage always has a cost. After breakfast, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys. Should I email the principal? Should I tell the school counselor? Should I call a lawyer? I didn't know the protocol for this kind of pain, but I knew it couldn't disappear quietly. The officer had promised to file a formal report. She said it fell under assault and emotional harm, even if there were no bruises. She asked for a copy of the video, which I sent from my phone before we even left the station. She also said something else. "You have every right to press charges, Miss Moore, but only if you're ready. It's not just about paperwork. It's about standing your ground." I was ready. Later that afternoon, I got a call. It was short. A female detective had been assigned to our case. She would follow up with questions and initiate a welfare check on Gertrude's home. The legal wheel had started to turn slowly but surely. When I hung up, I sat in silence. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just the sound of the dishwasher humming in the background and my daughter quietly coloring at the coffee table. She was sketching little stars in a spiral, over and over again, like she was trying to draw her way back to herself. I joined her on the floor. She didn't look up, but she scooted slightly to the side so I could sit beside her. "You did something really brave yesterday," I said. She kept coloring. I didn't feel brave. Most people don't, not until long after. She paused, then asked, "What happens now?" "We wait," I said. "The police will investigate, they'll talk to them, maybe even bring them in for questioning." She frowned. "They'll lie." I looked at her, that quiet certainty in her voice. She already knew how adults twist things to protect themselves. Maybe, I said, but we don't have to. She finally looked up. Her eyes were still tired, but I could see something else behind them now. A flicker. A tiny pilot light refusing to go out. We just have to tell the truth, I said, and keep telling it. She nodded slowly. That evening I made spaghetti, her favorite. She didn't eat much, but she asked for extra cheese. That felt like a win. We watched a movie together, something silly. She even laughed once, just a little, just for a second. But I caught it, and before bed, when I tucked her in, she whispered, "I'm glad we went." I brushed the edge of her cheek and said, "Me too." I turned off the light, walked to my bedroom, and closed the door. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a mother. I used to think time healed everything. But the truth is, time just buries things deeper. It doesn't erase pain. It teaches you how to carry it without making noise. That night, after I tucked Ellen in, I went to the bathroom and locked the door behind me. I turned on the faucet just loud enough to drown out my own breathing. Then I sat on the floor, pulled my knees to my chest, and let it come. The memory. It always started the same way. A hallway, a slam of a locker, laughter behind me. I was 15, walking through the high school corridors in a skirt I had saved up for months to buy. It wasn't fancy, just something that made me feel seen. Diane saw it too. She cornered me in the girls' bathroom with two of her friends. One held the door, the other stood guard. Diane didn't say a word. She just reached down and cut the hem with a pair of craft scissors. A big, ugly gash straight through the fabric. She called it a joke, said she was doing me a favor, said I looked ridiculous trying to act like someone I wasn't. And when I came home crying that day, Gertrude barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Stop being dramatic, Lydia," she said. "You always make things harder than they are." That was the moment I stopped trusting women who smiled too easily. I learned to shrink, to edit myself, to apologize before anyone asked me to. Now, all these years later, I was watching my daughter learn those same lessons, and I wasn't going to let her. Not again. I stood up from the bathroom floor and looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back. Older, heavier around the eyes, but harder too. There was something steel in me now, the kind that didn't rust, the kind that cut back. I walked into my bedroom and pulled out the plastic tub I kept beneath the bed. Old tax files, insurance documents, birth certificates. I found Ellen's school ID, the medical report from her last checkup, and the USB drive where I'd backed up the video. Then I found something I hadn't touched in years. A faded yellow folder with the word custody scrawled across the tab. Back when Ellen's father left, I fought like hell for full custody. Not because he was violent, not even because he was absent, but because he was indifferent. And indifference, I had learned, could be just as dangerous. I opened the folder and flipped through the paperwork. I knew how to fight. I had done it before. This time, I wasn't fighting for visitation or child support. This time, I was fighting for her soul. The next morning, I emailed the detective assigned to our case. I told her I was prepared to move forward with formal charges. I sent her the full-length video, a written statement from Ellen, and a list of names. Witnesses, family members who had seen Ellen before and after the incident. By noon, I received a response. The DA's office would review the footage. They might issue a summons. There would likely be interviews. It was the beginning of something. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt terrifying. I wasn't just burning bridges with my family. I was lighting a match to a legacy. But sometimes the only way to build something honest is to let the false structure collapse. I stepped into Ellen's room that evening. She was sketching again. This time a girl standing in the middle of a storm, her hair blowing wildly around her face. I sat beside her on the floor. "I talked to the detective," I said. She looked up. "They're moving forward." Her pencil paused. "What does that mean?" "It means they're listening. It means your voice matters." She nodded, then went back to shading the clouds. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I felt like I was beginning to fight, and that changed everything. The email went out first. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, coffee going cold beside me, and typed every word like I was chiseling it into stone. It wasn't long, just a few lines to Gertrude and Diane. But it was the first time in my life I said what needed to be said. "You hurt my daughter. I have the video. I've filed a report with the police. Please do not contact us again." I hovered over the send button longer than I should have. My hands shook. Part of me still wanted to explain, to soften the blow, to give them an exit ramp. But there was no more space for mercy when accountability had never been on the menu. I hit send, and then I turned my phone face down. A few minutes passed. Then it rang. Of course it did. First it was my mother, then Diane, then again, and again. I didn't answer. Not at first. I wasn't ready to hear whatever version of the truth they'd crafted in 24 hours, but by the fifth call, I couldn't help myself. I picked up. I didn't say hello. I just waited. Gertrude's voice came through, sharp and polished, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "Lydia, this is absurd. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were just playing with her. It was a joke." A joke. I had to close my eyes to keep from screaming. "She's 12, I said. "She came home shaking, crying. You cut her hair without consent. There's nothing funny about it." There was a pause. Then her voice softened in that patronizing way she always used when she wanted to control the conversation. "You've always been sensitive, Lydia. Always twisting things." I felt the old script trying to pull me back in, the gaslighting, the manipulation, but this time I had something they didn't. Proof. "I have the video," I said. Silence. "I've already sent it to the police," I added. "They'll be in touch." More silence. Then finally her voice cracked, not with remorse, but with fear. "You're going to destroy this family." That was when something in me snapped, not in a loud, dramatic way, in a quiet, bone-deep way, like a bridge giving out after years of carrying weight it was never built to hold. "This family destroyed itself a long time ago," I said. "I'm just done pretending it didn't." I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt light, like I had set something heavy down and stepped out from under it. I walked into the living room where Ellen was sitting on the rug with her schoolwork. She looked up, wary, like she could sense the shift in energy. "They called," I said. "I told them not to anymore." She nodded, didn't say anything, just went back to writing. But her shoulders relaxed. That was all I needed. Later that afternoon, I received an email from the school counselor. Apparently someone, probably Diane, had reached out to preemptively mention a family misunderstanding that might mischaracterize what happened at the party. Classic. I replied simply, "There was no misunderstanding. A report has been filed. We will handle all communication through the appropriate legal channels." Every word I typed that week felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I wasn't hiding anymore, not from their judgment, not from their history, not from my own fear. That night I sat beside Ellen on the couch. She was drawing again, this time a girl standing in front of a mirror, looking at her reflection with a quiet kind of defiance. "Is that you?" I asked. She shrugged. "Maybe." I put my arm around her and said, "She looks strong." Ellen didn't smile, but she didn't deny it either. And in that moment, I realized something. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were changing the story, one sentence at a time. A few days later, Ellen handed me her phone without a word. There was a new message from Milo. "I think you should have this too." Attached was a longer version of the video, unedited, no cuts, no filters. He had been filming before they even touched her hair. The clip caught the way Diane closed the bedroom door, how Gertrude told her, "Sit still, you're being difficult again." How Ellen said, voice shaking, "I want my mom," and Diane responded, "Your mom is weak." I watched it in full this time. I didn't pause. I didn't look away. Every second was evidence, not just of what they'd done, but how they thought they had every right to do it. I forwarded the clip to the detective with a note. "Updated footage, clear audio. You'll want to see this." Within hours, she replied. They were officially opening the case. That same afternoon, I got a phone call from the DA's office. They asked if I would be willing to bring Ellen in for a formal video interview. I asked her first. She didn't hesitate. She said, yes, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask her what she wanted to do. That evening, I braided what was left of her hair as best I could, just to keep it neat. As I worked, she looked at herself in the mirror. "I don't look like me," she said softly. "You look like the bravest version of you," I told her. And I meant it. The next morning, we returned to the precinct. This time, the room was colder, more clinical. A camera was mounted in the corner. A legal advocate sat in the back, silent but present. Ellen sat across from a new interviewer, a woman in her 40s, sharp but kind. She asked Ellen to recount everything step by step. My daughter didn't flinch. She told them about the scissors, about the laughter, about the words they used, how no one came to help, how it felt to walk out of that room with her dignity stripped down to the roots of her scalp. When it was over, the advocate leaned forward and said, "You were incredibly brave. I know adults who can't speak as clearly as you just did." Ellen nodded once, then looked at me. I mouthed, "I'm proud of you." Back in the car, she rolled the window down and let the wind hit her face. It was the first time she'd done that since the incident. I took it as a sign. Later that week, a formal summons was issued. Diane and Gertrude were notified of the investigation, and just like clockwork, the emails started. "This isn't necessary. We can settle this as a family. You're humiliating us." That last one made me laugh out loud. Humiliation had always been their weapon. Now it was their shield. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the emails, added them to our growing file, and slid them into a folder labeled Evidence Secondary Harassment. It felt strange, this new role I was stepping into, not just as a mother, but as a witness, a documentarian of injustice. A woman who had once whispered apologies, now logging every word like it mattered. Because it did. Because now I wasn't just protecting my daughter from what had already happened, I was protecting her from what would have happened next. That night, over takeout and ginger ale, Ellen asked me, "Do you think they'll go to jail?" I paused before answering. "I don't know," I said, "but I do know this. They won't get to pretend anymore. The world knows now." She nodded. "That's enough for me," she said. And honestly, it was enough for me too. The fallout didn't take long. Word traveled fast through the family. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly popped up in my inbox with vague, passive-aggressive questions. "Is it true you're suing your own mother? Why would you involve the police over something so small? Couldn't this have been handled privately?" Privately. That word had always been their favorite. Everything was supposed to stay within the family, meaning unspoken, meaning unresolved, meaning protected by silence so thick you could choke on it. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent out one group email, just one. "If you think what happened to my daughter is small, then you've never had your dignity taken by people who were supposed to love you. This isn't about vengeance, it's about protection. If that offends you, feel free to stop calling me family." That shut most of them up. But not Gertrude. A few days later, she showed up at my house, unannounced. She was standing on my front porch in one of her stiff beige blazers, clutching her purse like it was a weapon. Her lipstick was flawless, her eyes cold. I didn't want to open the door. But I did. Because part of me needed to see, face to face, how far she'd go to keep control. "Lydia," she said, calm like always, "this has gone far enough." I didn't respond. I stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame. She took a breath. "We're willing to apologize, but not like this. Not through the court, not in public." I stared at her for a moment, and then I asked, "Do you even know what you're apologizing for?" She blinked. "I'm sorry if Ellen felt uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" I said louder than I meant to. "She was assaulted. By you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "She's a dramatic child. You've always let her act out." There it was. The deflection. The blame. The same poison she had spoon-fed me for decades, now aimed at my daughter. I stepped out and closed the door behind me so Ellen wouldn't hear. My voice dropped into something cold and steady. "We're not playing the old game anymore. You don't get to rewrite the story this time." Her face twisted just slightly, like the mask cracked for a second. "You think this will make you feel powerful?" she asked. "No," I said, "but it'll make her feel safe." She didn't respond. She turned, walked back to her car, and drove off without another word. That night, I changed the locks. I didn't tell Ellen the full conversation, just that her grandmother had come by and wouldn't be coming back. She didn't ask questions. She just reached for my hand and said, "I'm glad." I don't think I realized until that moment just how much children absorb. Not just the things we say, but the things we tolerate, the way we let people treat us, the way we flinch or freeze or say it's okay when it's absolutely not. That week, I sat down with a lawyer. Not just to press forward with charges, but to put legal distance between us and the people who had hurt her. A restraining order was filed. Gertrude and Diane were formally notified. From that point forward, all contact would have to go through legal counsel. And you know what? They went quiet. Not because they were sorry, but because they were finally out of moves. That silence didn't feel like peace, but it felt like progress. And in this family, that was a revolution. The court date came faster than I expected. We didn't have to go to trial, at least not the kind you see on TV. It was a series of closed hearings. The judge reviewed the footage, read our statements, and listened to Ellen's recorded testimony in full. I sat through each session with a pen in my hand, not because I needed to take notes, but because I needed to hold something. Diane didn't look at me once. She kept her eyes down, hands folded, jaw clenched. Her lawyer did most of the talking, spinning stories about discipline, about concern for Ellen's behavior, about how it was all misunderstood family context. But the video spoke louder. Gertrude tried tears. At one point she actually said, "This is breaking my heart. I raised Lydia. I love that little girl like my own." I didn't flinch, because I finally understood something. Love that's used to control, to shame, to erase, isn't love at all. When the judge finally issued the ruling, it was quiet. No gavel bang, no dramatic gasps, just words on paper. Diane was found guilty of misdemeanor assault and emotional endangerment of a minor. No jail time, but fines, mandatory counseling, and a restraining order prohibiting any contact with Ellen for 2 full years. Gertrude wasn't charged criminally, but the court ordered mandatory family therapy if she ever wanted visitation rights again. She didn't look back as she left the courtroom, and I didn't watch her go. After the hearing, Ellen and I walked out into the sunlight. She held my hand, and I really noticed, how different her grip felt now. It wasn't anxious. It wasn't fearful. It was steady. She looked up at me and asked, "Is it over?" I thought about that for a second, then said, "The worst part is..." We went home and ordered pizza. I let her pick the toppings, even though she still insists on pineapple. We curled up on the couch under the same old knitted blanket that my grandmother, not Gertrude, the other one, had made years ago. We didn't talk about court. We watched silly movies. She laughed. She even made fun of my hair when I fell asleep with it in a bun that had collapsed halfway. Later that night, I sat in bed and wrote a letter I'd been meaning to write for decades. It wasn't to Diane, or to Gertrude. It was to myself, to the little girl I used to be, the one who sat on the school bus with her skirt torn and her cheeks burning, the one who spent years asking herself if she was too much or not enough, the one who tried so hard to earn love that wasn't really love at all. I wrote, "You did nothing wrong. You never did. You were bright and kind, and so brave. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner, but I'm here now, and I've got her, and we're going to be okay." I folded the letter, slipped it into an old photo album, and closed the book. For the first time in years, I felt like the story was starting to belong to me again. Not them, not the past, not the pain. Me and her. The hair salon smelled like lavender and something sweet. Maybe coconut oil, maybe safety. I had made the appointment a week after the court hearing. Quietly. No big declarations. Just a time slot, a name on the book, and a stylist I'd read about online who specialized in helping young girls through transitions. Divorce, grief, cancer, trauma. When I told Ellen, she didn't say yes right away. She just looked at me with that guarded look she had picked up in the last month. A look too old for 12. "Do I have to do it?" she asked. "No," I said. "But you can, if you want." She stared at herself in the mirror for a while. Her hair was still growing back, uneven and choppy from what Diane had done. She'd worn hoodies and hats every day since. But after a long pause, she nodded. "I think I'm ready." We walked in together on a Saturday afternoon. A woman named Carla greeted us with a smile that didn't feel forced. She didn't look shocked. She didn't ask what had happened. She just said, "Let's get you comfortable, sweet girl." Ellen sat in the chair, legs swinging a little. Carla gently lifted the hood of her sweatshirt. "Oh, wow," she said quietly, and then added, "You've got such strong features. We can frame your face beautifully." She didn't call it a mess. She didn't say, "Poor thing." She just saw her, as she was, right now. I sat nearby, pretending to read a magazine but really watching everything. Ellen didn't flinch when the cape was clipped around her neck. She didn't cry when the clippers hummed. She didn't look away when the mirror reflected her changing silhouette. She watched herself. Fully. Carla talked softly as she worked. "You like layers? Something edgy? Maybe a little swoop in the front?" Ellen nodded, then surprised both of us. "Can we do it asymmetrical?" Carla grinned. "Girl, we can do whatever makes you feel amazing." The transformation wasn't drastic in length, but it was in posture. As Carla shaped the final pieces, Ellen straightened her back. When Carla spun the chair for the final reveal, Ellen tilted her head and studied her reflection. She looked not like the old Ellen. She looked like the Ellen after, the Ellen who had survived. "Do you like it?" I asked gently. Ellen ran her fingers through the short, jagged edges that now brushed her cheekbone. "I look like someone who fought back," she said. I swallowed hard and blinked too many times. "You are someone who fought back." At the register, I tried to tip extra. Carla waved it off. "She already paid me," she said, smiling at Ellen. "In courage." On the way home, Ellen rolled the window down and let the wind touch her face again. This time, she didn't flinch. She didn't pull the hood back up when we stopped at a red light. She didn't hide. That evening, she spent an hour in her room reorganizing her bookshelf. She hung up a new sketch she'd drawn, a girl on a hilltop, her hair short and wild, her hands on her hips, facing the sun. I stood in the doorway watching, not saying anything, because healing, I've learned, doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day, in the shape of a haircut, or a sketch, or a girl standing taller than she ever has before. The first morning back at school, Ellen stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. She didn't ask me to braid her hair. There wasn't enough left to braid yet. Instead, she smoothed the front with a little water and fluffed the back like she'd seen Carla do. Her backpack looked too big on her shoulders. Or maybe it just looked right, because for the first time in weeks, she wore it with both straps and didn't hunch her body down like she was trying to disappear. "You sure you're ready?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then quietly she said, "They're going to stare." I nodded. "They might." She turned toward me. "Should I say something?" "You don't have to," I said. "But you can, if it makes you feel stronger." She looked back at the mirror, pressed her lips together, and nodded once. It wasn't an answer. It was a decision. The car ride was quiet, not tense, just thoughtful. At the drop-off line, Ellen reached for the door handle, then paused. "Will you wait until I get inside?" "I always do," I said. She gave a small smile. Not big, but enough. And then she stepped out. I watched her walk across the pavement toward the school doors. A few kids were already standing near the entrance. One of them pointed. Another whispered. One girl covered her mouth and gasped like something scandalous had happened. Ellen kept walking. Didn't run. Didn't shrink. She pulled her shoulders back and walked right through those doors like she owned them. I stayed until she was out of sight. Back home, I made coffee and stared at my laptop but couldn't work. My body was at the table, but my heart was still in that school hallway following her footsteps. Around 3:15, I pulled into the pickup line early. Too early. I was third in line, which meant sitting in the car for almost 40 minutes. I didn't care. When the final bell rang and kids began pouring out, my eyes scanned every face, and then I saw her. Walking with two classmates I didn't recognize. She was laughing. A real, shoulders-loose kind of laugh. Like something had cracked open inside her and the sunlight finally had a way in. She spotted me and waved, not shyly, not like someone trying to avoid attention, like someone proud of being seen. When she climbed into the passenger seat, I couldn't help it. "So?" I asked. She gave me that half smile again. "Emma said I looked like a rock star. James said he liked my art better than my hair anyway. And Mrs. White told me she was proud of how brave I was." "And how did that feel?" "Kind of weird," she said. "But good weird." We stopped for ice cream on the way home. She picked strawberry like always and got sprinkles this time. She told me about her math test and how the cafeteria was serving mystery meat again, and how she might try out for the art contest this semester. Not once did she mention Gertrude or Diane. Not once did she say the word hurt. And I didn't press her. Because this wasn't about what had been taken anymore. It was about what she was building now. A life she could step into with her chin up and her heart intact. One evening after Ellen had gone to bed and the house was finally still, I found myself pulling down a dusty box from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were old photos, birthday cards, letters I'd never mailed, and tucked between two yellowing notebooks was something I hadn't seen in years: my 6th grade yearbook. I sat cross-legged on the carpet and opened it. My picture was in the second row: long bangs, fake smile, the kind you practice in the mirror because you're afraid to look unsure. I ran my fingers over the page and remembered the day it was taken. Diane had cut my skirt that morning. Not all of it, just a slit high enough to make me pull my backpack to the front and pray no one noticed. Mom had said it was my fault for leaving it on the floor. I remember holding back tears in the photographer's line, determined not to let anyone see I was hurting. And now, decades later, here I was, finally letting that little girl breathe. I reached for my journal and started writing. But this time I didn't write to Ellen. I wrote to her, to the girl I used to be. Dear Lydia, I saw you today. In Ellen's walk, in her quiet bravery, in her laugh that doesn't ask for permission anymore. I thought you should know. She made it, and so did we. You've carried so much for so long, guilt that never belonged to you, silence that wasn't peace. I wish someone had told you back then that surviving isn't weakness, that forgiving yourself is part of healing. You did the best you could, and now I get to do better. For you, for her, for both of us. I stopped there. My hand was trembling. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat still, listening to the quiet hum of the night. Outside the window, the wind rustled the trees, and for the first time in what felt like years, it didn't sound like something breaking. It sounded like something moving forward. Later that week, I shared the letter with my therapist. She asked if I wanted to read it aloud. I did. Every word. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "That little girl needed a mother, and now she has one." I nodded. It wasn't about blame anymore, or revenge. It was about taking my own story back from the people who tried to bury it in shame. Ellen still had hard days. There were moments when she'd pause in the middle of brushing her new short hair and go quiet. Sometimes I'd find her staring into space, sketchbook in her lap, eyes full of something too big to name. But she always came back, and I never rushed her, because now I understood. Healing doesn't move in a straight line. It loops, it stumbles, it circles back before leaping ahead, but it moves. And every time Ellen stood a little taller, every time I said no without guilt, every time I chose truth over tradition, I was rewriting a legacy that had needed rewriting for generations. And somehow, somewhere deep down, I knew that the little girl in the yearbook, the one with the forced smile and the hidden tears, was finally smiling for real. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring. The sky was soft, like someone had wiped the blue with a watercolor brush. Ellen and I were riding bikes through the park near our house, just the two of us, like we used to before everything changed. She was a few yards ahead of me, hair tousled in the wind, her jacket open, no hoodie, no hat. Just her and the breeze and the kind of joy that doesn't ask for permission. I watched her as she pedaled, weaving in and out of sunlit patches on the path, laughing every time a squirrel darted by. There was a rhythm to her movement now, a steadiness, like the ground beneath her was finally something she could trust. We stopped near the lake. She dropped her bike on the grass and lay back, arms stretched wide. I sat beside her, letting the quiet settle in. "Remember when I used to cry every time I got dirt on my shoes?" she asked, grinning. "You were very concerned about being clean," I smiled. "Now I kind of like being messy," she said. Not in a gross way, just like not having to be perfect. I didn't respond right away, because the truth is, I knew exactly what she meant. For years I chased perfection like it was a requirement: a clean house, a calm tone, a good daughter, a quiet victim, and in the end, none of it protected me, or her. What protected us was truth. Messy, loud, imperfect truth. She turned her head toward me. "Are you still mad at Grandma?" I took a deep breath. I'm not mad the way I used to be, but I'm also not forgetting. Forgiving doesn't mean inviting the pain back in. Ellen nodded. She understood more than most adults I knew. We sat there a while longer, just breathing, listening to the wind rustle the trees and the faint splash of ducks in the distance. Eventually, we got up and rode back home. That night, after she fell asleep, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in my hands, staring at the photo on the fridge. It was Ellen at 6 years old, missing her front teeth, smiling with reckless abandon. I hadn't seen that kind of smile in a long time. But today at the park, I saw it again. And I realized something. Justice isn't always about punishment. It's not always a courtroom or a verdict or even an apology. Sometimes justice is watching your daughter laugh without fear. It's hearing her say, "I like who I am now." It's the quiet peace of a home where no one walks on eggshells anymore. It's knowing that the cycle stopped with you. I took a pen and a scrap of paper and wrote one sentence. She is free. I stuck it to the fridge right under that photo and turned off the light. And as I walked down the hall to my room, I felt something shift, not in the house, not in the world, but in me. A weight I hadn't noticed was gone, and in its place, the soft, steady truth of a mother who kept going, a girl who kept growing, and a legacy rewritten in love. It was a Wednesday morning when Ellen asked if we could go to the salon again. I was rinsing mugs in the sink, barely halfway through my coffee when she spoke. Her voice was calm, casual, like she was asking about breakfast. But I turned around slowly, letting the silence hang between us for a second longer. "Again?" I asked. She nodded. "I think I want to go even shorter this time." Her hair had started to grow in soft, even layers. It framed her face now, fierce and feminine in a way that looked nothing like what they'd tried to take from her. She didn't wear hats anymore, didn't avoid mirrors. But the idea that she wanted to go back, to sit in that chair again on her own terms this time, meant something. "Sure," I said, smiling. "You want me to call Carla?" She shook her head. "I already did." Of course she had. We arrived that afternoon. Carla greeted us with a grin and hugged Ellen like an old friend. They disappeared into the back, chatting about styles, textures, something called an undercut that I didn't even pretend to understand. I waited out front and watched through the glass. But this time, I didn't watch with worry. I watched with pride. An hour later, Ellen stepped out of the salon with the sides of her hair buzzed close and the top longer, swept to one side like something out of a fashion magazine. It was bold. It was hers, and she owned it like a crown. "Wow," I said, laughing. "You look unstoppable." She shrugged, but her smile said she knew. That night, while we were folding laundry, she told me something I wasn't ready for. "Mom," she said, sitting on the floor with a pile of towels, "I think I want to talk about it." I looked up from a t-shirt I had just rolled. "Talk about what, honey?" "What happened? At the party, with Grandma and Diane. Not like in therapy. I mean at school." My stomach tensed. "You want to talk to your friends?" "Not just them. Maybe, like the whole class. At assembly or something." I sat down beside her. "Are you sure?" She nodded, serious now. "I think if I say it out loud, it won't feel so heavy anymore, and maybe someone else needs to hear it too." I didn't have the words to tell her how proud I was. I just reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear, what little was left of it. "Then I'll help you," I said. "We'll figure it out together." The school counselor agreed immediately. A quiet woman with kind eyes and sensible shoes, she offered Ellen the option of writing it out first. Ellen did. 3 pages. Every word her own. Every sentence pulsing with quiet courage. The following Friday, she stood in front of 200 middle schoolers in the gymnasium, clutching her paper but barely glancing down at it. She told them about pride, about how sometimes grown-ups use love like a leash, about how silence can feel like safety until it starts to hurt. And then she said something I'll never forget. "They took my hair because they thought that would take my power, but they were wrong. My power was never in my hair, it was in my voice, and I'm using it now." The room was silent for a moment after she finished. Not because they didn't care, but because they did. And then applause, not the polite kind either. Real, thunderous applause that echoed off the walls. A few kids stood up, then more. By the time she walked back to her seat, almost the entire auditorium was on its feet. That night, she didn't talk much. She just curled up on the couch next to me, a blanket around her shoulders, and watched the ceiling like it held some secret only she could see. Finally she whispered, "It's not heavy anymore." I didn't ask her to explain. I knew exactly what she meant. And I realized, maybe the healing wasn't just hers. Maybe it was mine too. The following morning I woke up before Ellen. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The house was quiet in that gentle way it sometimes gets just before the day wakes up. No cars passing by, no birds yet. Just me and the sound of my own breath. I padded barefoot into the kitchen and put the kettle on. While I waited for it to boil, I noticed something strange. The air felt lighter, like some invisible pressure had lifted overnight. Maybe it was the silence after her speech, or the applause, or the look on her face when she said it wasn't heavy anymore. Maybe it was because, for the first time, I believed her. After tea, I wandered into the back room, the one I never fully unpacked when we moved in. A mix of storage boxes, half-full bookshelves, a pile of things I told myself I'd sort through when the time was right. I sat on the floor and started going through them. The first box had baby clothes, onesies, tiny socks, a stuffed elephant with one eye missing. I smiled. The second was harder. Letters, journals, a photo album with a cracked leather cover. I opened it and found images I'd forgotten. Diane and me as girls, sitting on a porch swing, in matching dresses. I was smiling in all of them, but the kind of smile I knew now wasn't real. I flipped a few more pages and came to a photo of Mom. Gertrude. She was young in this one, maybe mid-30s, holding Diane's hand tightly, standing behind me like a shadow. My hand was reaching toward her, but her eyes weren't on me. They were on Diane. Even in a still image, you could feel it, where the attention went, where it never did. I closed the album gently and set it aside. Then I reached for a smaller box tucked beneath the others. Inside were cards, letters, things Mom had written me over the years, mostly on holidays or birthdays. Some were sweet, others were laced with guilt. The kind of love that comes with a hook. The most recent card was from Ellen's birthday the year before. "You let her be too wild. That's not strength, Lydia. That's recklessness." I held the card for a moment, then stood up and walked it straight to the trash. No hesitation. I didn't need her voice in my house anymore. I didn't need that version of motherhood living in the walls. Later that day, I sat down at my desk and opened a new document on my computer. At the top I typed, "To the girl I used to be and the one I'm raising now." I didn't know exactly what I was writing yet. A letter, a story, a map? Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally telling the truth, about how love is supposed to protect, not punish. About how silence is not the same as peace. About how the hardest part of healing isn't forgiving them. It's forgiving yourself for staying small for so long. Ellen came in halfway through, holding a bowl of cereal. "Are you writing?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "Is it about Grandma?" "No," I smiled. "It's about us." She nodded, took a spoonful, and leaned against my arm. "Put the part in about the day I rode down the hill with no brakes," she said. "That was awesome." I laughed. "Of course, that's the best part." And just like that, the rest of it started to pour out. Not like a flood, more like a quiet stream finally released after years behind a dam. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave it shape. And shape, I've learned, is the beginning of letting go. That night, I printed out the pages I'd written and placed them in a folder. Then I took the old photo album, the one with the cracked cover and the old pane, and slid it onto the bottom shelf of the bookcase. Not to hide it, but to say, this is where it belongs now. Not on the kitchen table, not in my daily pocket, but here. Filed, closed, finished. And then I turned off the light. And for the first time in years, I didn't check the locks twice. A few weeks later, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a letter I had been rewriting in my head for almost 3 decades. But this time, I was actually putting it down on paper. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. Not to Gertrude, not to Diane, not even to Ellen. It was addressed to the version of me that used to hide in closets, that walked on eggshells, that smiled at family dinners while her insides curled tight with shame. It started simply. "You didn't deserve it." I let those words sit there, heavy and raw, because for most of my life I thought I had. Every glare, every insult, every time I was compared, diminished, overlooked, I had filed it under what I must have done wrong. But the truth is, there was no secret crime I committed. I was just a girl with too many questions in a house that worshipped silence. A girl who wanted to be loved without condition and paid for that desire with her voice. Writing the letter wasn't for closure. That's too clean a word. It was for clarity, to put a line between what happened and what I carried. Ellen found me there later that afternoon, her sketch pad under one arm, her face smudged with pencil. "Mom," she said, "can I show you something?" I nodded and scooted over. She opened her book and revealed a drawing of two women, one older, one younger, on a bike path, the younger just ahead, wind in her hair, the older smiling behind her. It was us, but it wasn't a memory. It was now. "You made me brave," she said simply. I looked at her and felt something bloom in my chest. Not pride exactly, something gentler, wiser. Like the part of me that used to only know how to survive had finally learned how to simply live. That weekend we returned to the same park from months ago. Same trail, same sun filtering through the trees, but everything was different. Ellen rode ahead again, stronger now, confident. No hesitation in her legs, no fear in her face. And I followed, not as a protector this time, but as someone who trusted the girl in front of her to find her way. We stopped by the lake, just like before. She tossed a stone across the water and watched the ripples spread. "You know what I think?" she said. "What?" "I think justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like freedom." I smiled. "I think you're exactly right." We sat there for a while, saying nothing more. And as I watched her, hair short, eyes steady, hands resting in her lap, I realized something I never thought I'd believe. I had already won. Not in court, not in confrontation, but here, in this moment, with a daughter who laughed again, with a house where we weren't afraid to speak, with a story that no longer belonged to them, but to us. Later that night, after Ellen went to bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my desk. I opened my journal, the one I'd nearly filled this year, and wrote one final entry on the last page. Justice is not a gavel. It's not a sentence. It's not even an apology. Justice is the look on my daughter's face when she knows she's safe. Justice is hearing her laugh through the walls at night. Justice is watching her grow into someone they will never be able to shrink again. I closed the book. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked down the hallway and peeked into Ellen's room. She was fast asleep, one arm thrown over her pillow, mouth slightly open, peaceful, unburdened. And in that quiet, I realized something else. This story we lived, it didn't end with a courtroom or a haircut or even a letter. It ended right here, with two people who chose to stay, who chose love over legacy, truth over tradition, and who, finally, chose each other. The first time Ellen sat in the new salon chair, she didn't flinch when the scissors came out. Carla greeted her with a smile, just like before. But this time, Ellen didn't need me to stay in the room. She walked in with a clear photo reference, a firm tone in her voice, and a look that said, "I know who I am now." She wanted something bold, a shaved side, a textured fringe. Nothing girly, she told Carla, but nothing to hide behind either. As I waited in the front room, I thought about how different this version of her was from the one who'd once sobbed in the car, hands pressed to her head like it was too heavy to hold. She wasn't rebuilding what had been taken. She was building something new. After the appointment, she stepped out with her head held high. Her eyes were bright, cheeks pink with excitement. She looked like a version of herself I hadn't met yet, but had been waiting to. "Do you like it?" she asked. "I love it," I said. "But do you?" She didn't answer with words. She just smiled and spun in a full circle on the sidewalk, arms open wide like she was trying to catch the whole sky. At home, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not inspecting, just looking, really looking. "I don't think I'll ever grow it long again," she said. "That's okay," I told her. "It's yours. You get to decide." She nodded. Then, as casually as if she were asking about dinner, she added, "I think I want to get a tiny streak of color, maybe blue, just one." I raised an eyebrow. "Blue?" "Just a little," she grinned. "To remind me I'm not afraid to be seen." That evening, she pulled out her art supplies and began sketching again. But the girl on the paper wasn't hiding behind her hair. She was flying, arms outstretched, head tilted back in joy. Her short hair flared in the wind, with one bright streak of blue. Ellen had stopped drawing pain. Now she was drawing freedom. And as the light from her desk lamp pooled around her, I realized something I hadn't quite named before. They didn't just fail to break her. She used the break to grow. One quiet afternoon, I found myself sitting at my desk again, the window open, a breeze carrying in the scent of early summer. Ellen was out with friends, her first time spending the afternoon away from me since everything happened. No check-ins, no updates, just a goodbye kiss on the cheek and the echo of her laugh as she ran out the door. The silence in the house was different now, not hollow, peaceful. I glanced over at the old journal I hadn't touched in weeks, the one where I wrote to the girl I used to be. I opened it to a blank page, unsure of what I meant to say, but my hand moved anyway. "You're safe now." 3 words. Simple, true, and somehow enough. For years I had carried her around like unfinished business, like something I had to keep fixing. But the truth is, she didn't need fixing. She needed kindness. So I wrote her the letter I wish someone had written to me when I was 12. When I felt invisible, when my worth was measured in obedience and silence. I told her she was allowed to take up space, to say no, to want more. I told her she was loved even when no one said it out loud. I told her I saw her, and then I closed the journal for the last time. Not because the story was over, but because the part of me that wrote it had finally been heard. Later that evening, I took down the old family portrait that still hung in the hallway, one of those stiff studio photos where everyone wore forced smiles and matching clothes. I replaced it with something new. A photo Ellen had taken at the park a few weeks earlier. Me, laughing mid-sentence, head thrown back, eyes closed, sunlight spilling over my shoulders. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that, I decided, was better. That night, I stood by Ellen's bedroom door for a moment, just listening. She was humming to herself, low and soft, pencils scratching across her sketch pad. She didn't know I was there, and I didn't need to interrupt her. She was building something. A future, a self, a life. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to let her, because I trusted the girl behind that door. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to trust myself, too. I used to believe that justice looked like punishment. A courtroom, a verdict, someone being forced to say, "I'm sorry." But now I understand something deeper. Justice is quieter than that. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes justice is the soft place your child lands after falling hard. It's the silence that no longer feels dangerous. It's the morning you wake up and realize you're no longer carrying what someone else broke. Justice is when your daughter walks into a room and doesn't shrink. It's when she looks in the mirror and sees someone worth protecting. It's when you look in the mirror and finally say, "I was always enough." For too long, we confuse survival with peace. We confuse keeping the family together with love, but family isn't who you share blood with. It's who stands with you when it matters. It's who believes your pain, who protects your light, and who helps you write a new story when the old one hurt too much. To the mothers watching this who are trying to break a cycle, to the daughters learning to speak their truth, to the quiet ones, the brave ones, the ones still healing, you are not alone. You never were. And if no one told you yet today, you are worthy of love that doesn't ask you to shrink. You are worthy of a home that doesn't hurt. You are worthy of being seen. If Ellen's story moved something in you, I invite you to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment if you've lived through your own storm. And don't forget to subscribe, because this space, this corner of the internet, is for truth, for healing, and for starting again. Thank you for walking this journey with us. We'll see you in the next story.